Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Hundreds worry a Victoria mortgage broker has lost their life savings.
A lot of people are owed a lot of money.
The lawsuits he's facing and what happens next. Plus, 4 years later, a guilty plea in the death of a 14-year-old at a Langley skate park.
Mixed emotions, mixed thoughts about it. There is a part of me that wanted to see him properly convicted through a trial.
The reaction from the teen's family. And years in the making, the opening of a controversial connector through a popular Surrey park.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. Hundreds of people are worried they've lost their life savings with the BC mortgage broker accused of misappropriating more than $25 million from his clients. A handful of them spoke at court hearing today, sharing their concerns. The CBC's Yasmin Renea joins us with more on this growing scandal. Yasmin, tell us more about what the alleged victims are facing.
Anita, around 400 concerned investors attended court. About 50 came in person while the rest joined virtually. They all say mortgage broker Greg Martel and his company haven't paid them in months. Martel and his company, My Mortgage Auction Corp., which also does business as Shop Your Own Mortgage, have been facing a flurry of lawsuits from investors claiming millions in unpaid funds. One investor who spoke today says people were enticed by promises of big returns and that she hopes she hasn't lost her life savings. And others say something similar.
There are lots of lenders and investors who are owed a lot of money, and I think that from my understanding, I've had calls from many investors who borrowed money against their houses to invest in this company, and obviously this is a very serious issue.
Now, last week, BC Supreme Court placed Mortgage Auction Corp in receivership. The company's assets are now being controlled by PricewaterhouseCoopers. That decision came after another firm in Alberta claimed Martel owned it $17.6 million, and Pricewaterhouse claims a bank account in Martel's name had $58 million deposited and then withdrawn over the past 6 months, and that only about $270 remains. We've reached out to Martel, but he hasn't responded.
Okay, so what happens now? What happens next?
Well, PricewaterhouseCoopers has been put in place to find out where the money is and has been granted powers to investigate other companies that Martel owns. Here's more from lawyer Chris Ramsey.
This order today gives the receiver manager more power, more investigatory power to enable it to track down and start looking at other companies that may have received money from the company in Victoria.
The receiver presented reports to court today that say Martel owns highly mortgaged, multi-million-dollar property in Victoria and Las Vegas, and that he has spent lavishly on private jets and luxury apartment rentals. A lawyer speaking behalf of Martel says he has the money to start paying some of the plaintiffs. He's been asked to provide a list of assets by the end of this week. The court hearing will resume next Wednesday.
Yasmin Renea reporting for us tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, there's more fallout on what started as a conflict of interest and has now turned into a full-blown scandal. 24 hours after allegations surfaced of the head of BC Housing funneling money to a nonprofit run by his wife, we're finally hearing from Atira at the center of it all. Atira is the largest housing provider in BC and was implicated in the forensic audit released yesterday. As Mayor Baines tells us, the province is under fire for tripling its funding to the society, even as red flags were already mounting.
BC Housing is starting its inspections of 50 buildings run by Atira Women's Resource Society. Atira provides housing for women and children fleeing violence.
Do I feel safe here? 100%. Do I love it here? I love it here.
Still, accusations of unsanitary conditions and crime have plagued some of its other facilities over the years. The province has asked for a change in leadership after a forensic audit found conflict of interest rules were broken by the then CEO of BC Housing, Shane Ramsey, dealing with the CEO of Atira, his spouse, Janice Abbott.
The inspections will start immediately. The audit will start very soon once we have an auditor in place.
The housing provider responded to the report with a statement from its board of directors. We are unsurprised by the key finding of the review that there was no evidence of financial improprieties within Atira's operations. Atira's board says it has no plans to change its leadership. Atira CEO Janice Abbott has not made herself available for interviews. The minister responded to reports. Abbott said she has not read the report.
It shows a level of lack of concern for the information that's been provided.
Still, BC Housing's funding to Atira increased from $21 million in 2018 to $74 million in 2022, according to the audit. As Atira management digs in, the opposition BC United is asking why the province didn't act sooner.
It actually goes back to 2018 when BDO, an accounting firm, came out with a scathing report on the mismanagement and carelessness with taxpayer dollars that was taking place at BC Housing Corporation and at Atira.
As controversy swirls over its finances, some Atira workers are looking to unionize.
They have numerous health and safety issues that they encounter in the workplace that have not been addressed by management.
The province also wants a $1.9 million surplus back from Atira. As the province moves ahead, it's clear the housing provider will be under more scrutiny. Mira Baines, CBC News, Victoria.
Now, the allegations of mismanagement at BC Housing have dominated talk in Victoria for the past 2 days. But this isn't the first time BC Housing and Atira's relationship has come into question. Municipal Affairs reporter Justin McElroy has more on the history and what happens next.
What is the most concerning aspect of BC Housing's relationship with Atira, the nonprofit they gave more money to than any other housing organization in the last 3 years, and where the CEOs were married to each other? Was it the deleted texts, the allegations employees were told to make it happen when it came to approving projects, the gaps in financial oversight? Or was it the fact that all of this was warned about more than a decade ago?
Atira has received a lot of tax dollars from BC Housing, an estimated $20 million and counting since 2007.
That was in 2012. CBC News did reports on Atira, on the relationship between BC Housing CEO Shane Ramsey and Atira CEO Janice Abbott, and the worries about the safety of their buildings. So what happened? The government of the day said, not to worry.
I have no indication whatsoever at any time that that has not been handled properly.
And what happened in the decade after? Here is a chart. That $20 million Atira had gotten by 2012, that number is now $300 million. But reporters kept asking questions, talking to people in Atira buildings, chief among them Jen St. Dennis of the Tyee. And she says the concerns never went away.
People generally did not want to go on the record to talk about this, but my sense is that this was like sort of an open secret within the housing sector, that everybody kind of had this maybe suspicion or knowledge or some sort of inkling that, you know, there was this big conflict of interest risk.
And ultimately, that's what investigators found, 25 times. So where will things go from here? There will likely be additional scrutiny put on BC Housing because it funds not just Atira, but organizations that operate across the province. And municipalities are watching carefully.
And I think it calls into question the bigger issues around the public expectations around public accountability and transparency.
And it's just possible BC Housing has been aware of this for a while, because last December, right in the middle of this investigation, they approved a new contract worth just under $400,000 to hire an outside communications firm for the year to help build trust with municipalities. Little wonder why these days a lot more trust seems needed. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Vancouver police have released photos of a person suspected in a series of sex assaults in the city's downtown core, and they're looking for help in finding him. The VPD say 4 women have reported being sexually assaulted at night in the area around BC Place and Rogers Arena since April 27th. Police believe the same man is behind each assault. The suspect is described as a dark-skinned man in his 30s with glasses and a mustache. He's roughly 5'5". More testimony at the trial for the man accused of killing a 13-year-old girl in Burnaby Central Park, with a doctor telling the court the victim likely died from a lack of oxygen to the brain. A neuropathologist took the witness stand, reviewing diagrams of the victim's brain. His assessment of the teen found shrunken neurons, suggesting a lack of oxygen and blood flow to the brain. The Crown says the girl was sexually assaulted and strangled to death, and the accused in the case, Ibrahim Ali's DNA, was found at the scene. Meanwhile, a 20-year-old man has pleaded guilty to manslaughter in the overdose death of a Langley teen. 14-year-old Carson Cremini was found unconscious at Walnut Grove Skate Park in 2017. His family alleged he was given drugs by older teenagers who mocked and filmed him as he died rather than help him.
There is a part of me that wanted to see him properly convicted through a trial and have the judge declare him guilty, but part of me is, I guess, I don't know if relieved is the word, but content to know that it is a guilty verdict still.
CBC is not naming the 20-year-old as he was a minor at the time of the incident. Well, a controversial connector through a popular Surrey park is finally set to open tonight. The new 84 Avenue Road connects 128th Street to Fraser Highway, meant to bring a new major east-west route to the city. The hope is it will lower accidents and reduce congestion, but the project hasn't come without pushback, with environmental groups petitioning to block the work near Bear Creek Park. That petition was dismissed, and the roadway is set to open tonight. We have breaking news now out of BC's interior. More evacuation orders have been issued for residents in Cache Creek. The village has issued the order over safety concerns because of flooding in the Bonaparte River. Residents at the units listed here along Old Caribou Road, Nugget Road, and Collins Road are urged to leave the area immediately. Johanna is off tonight. Let's check in with Amy Bell. Amy, what can we expect in terms of that, the weather and how it's going to affect flooding?
The weather around there is a bit unsettled today, but no significant rainfall. What we will have to keep an eye on, though, is as we head into this very unseasonably hot stretch for May, we're going to see a rapid melt in many areas, so that could increase the risk of flooding. So certainly something we need to keep an eye out in the next several days. But for tonight, hopefully things stay fairly unchanged. Taking a look at the rest of the province, we are just still in a bit of a transition period. We did see some strikes of lightning in some areas of the central interior today and also in the Caribou, and that risk does continue for tomorrow afternoon. And then we head into this very clear and very hot stretch, which will bring its own set of issues with the flooding, but also that risk of wildfires. But you can see we really start to clear up after just a bit of instability for tomorrow. So taking a look at the rest of the province, we are looking at lots of sunshine across the board, still unsettled in Whistler tomorrow. And then you can see right through the stretches we saw yesterday, and today, we will have that unsettled air mass. That moves over to Alberta, though, by tomorrow evening, and then we are set for very sunny and very hot weather. I'm not joking. We're going to be up to about 31 inland by Saturday, even warmer for Sunday, and this warm weather will last well into next week.
All right, thanks, Amy.
You're welcome.
Well, there's a significant change in advice out of the U.S. tonight about when to start routine breast cancer screening. A medical task force is recommending dropping the age from 50 to 40. Ethel Musa looks at why and what the advice is here in Canada.
Come, doggies, you are so good. Natalie Quadron says it was 2019 when she first felt a lump in her breast while taking a shower.
I was 46 at the time, so I wasn't particularly worried.
Neither was her doctor, she says, at first.
We do recommend mammograms from 50 onwards. You're only 46, so chances of you having breast cancer aren't very big.
Today, Natalie says she's living with terminal cancer, something she wishes was caught sooner.
I am a little angry. It's a bitter pill to swallow that I was too young to get a mammogram.
A panel of independent medical experts from across Canada recommend mammograms every 2 to 3 years for individuals between the ages of 50 and 74. Provinces like Ontario and Quebec follow that advice. In Alberta, where Natalie lives, the recommended age for breast cancer screenings was lowered last year to 45. But Natalie says
it's not standardized across Canada,
and some experts want it to be.
All women who are at average risk should be screened at 40, but especially Black, Asian, and Hispanic women whose breast cancers tend to start younger than in white women. So their peak incidence is in the mid-40s.
That's one of the reasons why a U.S. panel of medical experts has revised its advice on routine mammograms in that country. It now recommends those at average risk start getting regular mammograms at 40.
I do feel that Canada should take notice. What's in the line is that people's quality of life and people's lives are at risk.
Breathe. Canada's panel of experts say those who are younger than 50 who wish to be screened should have a discussion with their healthcare provider to decide if it's best for them. They also say that decision should be weighed against the potential harms, such as false positives and overdiagnosis. Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Love 'em or hate 'em, Canada geese seem to spark plenty of conversations, but one thing seems to be certain: there are too many. What Vancouver plans to do is next. A fiery quarterback in Canadian football has died. Joe Kapp was 85. Kapp led the BC Lions to their first Grey Cup title in 1964, then played in the NFL before leading the Minnesota Vikings to a Super Bowl appearance in 1967. He also made headlines in 2011 when he and a fellow Hall of Famer had a fight during a CFL Alumni Association luncheon in Vancouver. Here's a look back at Kapp playing with the Lions.
The second year of Ralph Henderson's term as president saw much change. But Fleming was his old self. Against Ottawa, nearly 50 yards in 5 seconds for a touchdown. In September, the Lions acquired the quarterback they've been looking for all these years, number 22, Joe Kapp. Here he throws complete to number 35, Beamer, who fights his way to the 10-yard line. Now Kapp passes to number 36, Don Visick, complete, a major score. But it had been another gloomy season. The scoreboard, 1 win, 13 losses, and 2 ties. Dave Scrine replaced Wayne Robinson as head coach, and Regina football executive Don McPherson chaired a football commission on what's wrong with the Lions. In 1962, his first year, President Clayton Slim Delbridge, former newspaper executive, built upon the strengths of what he'd inherited and learned from all that had gone before. Like this play, Fleming's uncanny catch and run, 55 yards and 6 points. But let's watch the way the staff and team cooperate in this positive manner. Head coach Dave Scrine and assistant Jim Champion spot a weakness in their opponent's defense. It's confirmed by spotter Frank Johnson on the east roof. Quarterback Joe Kapp receives instructions from Scrine and waits his chance. First and goal, number 22, Kapp rolls to his right, jumps, passes, complete to number 78, Pat Claridge, for the touchdown. And after 10 seasons, the Lions have fight as well as finesse. Watch number 24, Tommy Larscheid, as he bursts past would-be tacklers for a 25-yard gain that should have been stopped at the line of scrimmage.
Well, Herb, Bob, it's an amazing experience. It's like watching a youngster grow up. To see the change in the football over that period of time and to see what's happening out there, it's an opportunity to see the improvement visually in a short period of time, and I really enjoyed it. The couple things that aren't there, of course, you don't really see the contribution that the fans have made over a period of time, nor the enthusiasm that we have in this tremendous city of ours.
Well, Herb, there's one thing I'd like to ask you point blank. And I'd like to thank you on behalf of the fans because they have made this contribution so solidly over 10 years that I don't think anybody can measure it. Herb, you mentioned a new era of prosperity for football in Canada.
Bob, I looked at this film and I thought, well, that's 10 years gone by. It still doesn't show any Grey Cup. It still doesn't show any playoffs. It doesn't show the things that are going to happen. I think some way you have to visualize what's going to happen over the next few years and not just over the next 10 years.
Herb, you've given me a great idea. Let's call this film First and 10.
Bob, I like it.
There's a push to do more to tackle a problem that's been plaguing BC cities for years. And now there's a new strategy from Vancouver's Park Board to stop the growth of the Canada goose population. As the CBC's Saurabh Sandhu tells us, it includes the possibility of lethal action, which is concerning to some.
You can spot them just about anywhere in the city, from parks and beaches to rooftops and residential neighborhoods. Vancouver's Canada goose population has soared in recent years, with experts estimating it could hit 10,000 by 2030, but not everyone is celebrating.
I think everybody in the city has had to experience conflicts with geese and would prefer to not.
The city's park board plans to control the goose population with measures like monitoring, hazing, and addling, a process in which city staff swaps geese eggs with non-viable duplicates. If that fails, it might consider more lethal options like culling, an idea that has ruffled some feathers.
I'm not averse to stopping the eggs from hatching, but I am totally against culling.
I think that the geese are lovely, beautiful creatures that add a lot of life to the city and have personalities, and we should just cohabitate with them.
Sometimes when you have seen so many in a city, it's kind of, they make a little bit mess, we can say. But around, as like in Stanley Park and any other parks.
Where I live too.
Yeah, it's nice to have them around.
The board, however, says implementing a lethal move would only be a last resort measure and would require approval from federal and provincial regulators.
And that process involves showing them an approved management plan, which is the appendix to tonight's report, and demonstrating that the current methods that we're using to mitigate impacts of geese are insufficient.
One scientist says Vancouver is among many cities struggling with how to control its goose population, but that he's encouraged by current course of action.
I would expect as a scientist that they're going to be monitoring the goose population moving forward to see if their management actions are having the desired outcome, but also making sure that people and the attitudes and reactions of the human population are taken into account as well.
Park Board is hoping to stabilize the population growth in 5 to 10 years' time. The new plan is estimated to cost up to $375,000 per year. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
It's called the Battleship Mountain Wildfire, and it's big at more than 347 square kilometers in size, about the size of Surrey. Another fun fact, it's a zombie fire. What that is and why it matters, next. Thanks once again for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. To help monitor changes in the environment and to better track wildlife in the community, federal researchers are building partnerships with Indigenous communities. The CBC's Carla Ulrich has more on what that looks like from Fort Smith in Northwest Territories.
Indigenous communities are working with several academic institutions and the federal and territorial governments to create more wildlife monitoring programs across the territory. John McDonald is developing a program with the Fort Smith Métis Council. He said they started out as boat drivers for the researchers, but after some lessons with environment and natural resources, they are now setting up the cameras themselves. McDonald says it's important for community members to take the lead.
Being downstream from the oil sands is very pertinent to us being safe and healthy down here. It's key to be able to tell the people that, hey, the water's safe to drink, the fish are safe to eat, and the animals are safe to hunt, and anything to do with environment, anything to do with wildlife, fish, water, air, we want to be involved.
McDonald said once they get the images back next year, they will partner with Environment and Climate Change, formerly known as ENR, to learn how to analyze the camera data. Claudia Haas is a PhD student at Wilfrid Laurier University. She said the partnership makes sense and that the knowledge the community can offer is vast.
A lot of these Indigenous governments have guardians programs, and they know the areas better than we do. But also, I think there's just a mutual interest there of being able to understand the wildlife and to monitor where they are now, but also how they might be changing into the future with climate change.
A public webinar will feature work being done by the communities. Participants will learn about the resources and supports available to communities interested in developing their own programs. Carla Ulrich, CBC News, Fort Smith.
In northeastern BC, officials are watching several wildfires, including a blaze that's being labeled as a zombie fire, which means it's actually been burning since last summer. The Battleship Mountain wildfire is in the district of Hudson's Hope. At last update, it was close to 347 square kilometers in size, or almost 35,000 hectares, but it is to be under control, and it's believed to have been sparked by lightning discovered on August 30th, 2022. Let's learn a little bit more about what zombie fires are, because it's a term that's pretty new to me as well. Fire Information Officer Alex Lane joins me from the Prince George Fire Center. Alex, so a zombie fire is essentially a blaze that manages to last through the winter months and keep going after. How does this even happen?
So what we call them is holdover or overwinter fires. So what's happening here is that the fire is burning deep in the duff layer, which is basically the layer in between mineral soil and the surface fuel. And up here in the north and in the northeast, when we get into the muskeg type areas, that duff layer is really quite deep. So what's happening is that the fire is burning and smoldering in that deep duff layer. So what happens is in the winter when it snows, sometimes the snow doesn't penetrate quite that deep enough to extinguish the fire. So coming into the spring, the Battleship Mountain fire, for example, is still considered an active wildfire because it has been smoldering underground in the interior over the winter.
Okay, so if there's no actual flames that you can see and it's still underground, how do you tackle that, or are you leaving it alone because it is contained?
So during the winter, it's not something we can action while it's snow covered. Now that it is spring, there is the opportunity to action the fire. Those deeper burning, smoldering fuels can come up to the surface and ignite surface fuels again. But what we've done in 2022 is crews focused on extinguishing the perimeter of the fire. And that's why it's considered under control at this time, because we're not expecting it to grow beyond the perimeters that have been established. So any of that smoke or activity that is occurring, so residents in the area may see smoke, but that is burning inside the fire in the interior, and it's not expected to grow beyond existing boundaries.
Okay, and just really quickly here before we let you go, experts, they expect the frequency of these fires to increase with climate change. We know this one is under control, but how concerned is BC Wildfire Service about these types of fires going forward?
So our concern right now is those new fires from the 2023 season that are currently impacting communities and residents in the northeastern part of our fire center. The Battleship Mountain wildfire is still a wildfire. It's still an active fire. We do have it on our radar, but right now we are concerned primarily with those new fires that are impacting our communities.
Okay, Alex Lane is a Fire Information Officer with the BC Wildfire Service. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That is it for our show tonight. You can always find our news program online, cbc.ca/BC, and we will see you tomorrow night.